What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here. Little bit of a throwback. We are doing a Marvel Monday in honor of one of the best movies I have seen in years. The wife and I went out Saturday night, went to see Across the Spider-Verse, got the souvenir popcorn tin, got the souvenir cup, whole 9 yards. Movie was absolutely fantastic. No spoilers in this video. If I decide to talk spoilers, I will save it to the very end. But needless to say, the movie was absolutely amazing. As someone that collects a lot of Gwen / Ghost Spider / Spider-Gwen stuff, great. Just great movie, especially the beginning. Just a fantastic movie. Walked out of there and immediately tried to not FOMO into making 25 purchases just on the way home from the movie. It was rough. It was rough. I actually submitted some offers on some stuff on Sunday. It's Sunday afternoon when I'm recording this. So part of this video is my therapy session for myself to step away from the eBay and the Facebook groups and cleanse the palate, if you will, to not FOMO into anything that I may regret later. Though usually Gwen stuff I don't typically regret after the fact. So what I wanted to do is just kind of hop in and take a look at a couple key books from the movie. First appearance of Miles, first appearance of Gwen, and some Spider-Man 2099 stuff. Those are essentially the three main characters in the movie, mostly Miles and Gwen, with 2099 mixed in a little bit as well, and some others. But I wanted to focus in on those specific three. Now, the thing with all those characters are Miles and Gwen and 2099 are all more modern tier. In fact, Miles and Gwen I put in modern. There is no such thing in the comic book world. You have your silver, your copper, your bronze, your gold, and your pre-code horror. And modern just kind of gets lumped in with everything else. I view it as modern being the Miles Gwen era. I've talked about this when I had Swaggle House on. You have a bunch of other characters in there. Kamala Khan, Strange Academy, Silk, Ironheart. Like that era of characters I view as modern. And then really from like 2020 onwards, 2021, like this basically COVID, right before pre-COVID onward, I consider ultra modern. Now, ultra modern, I don't mess with it all in comic books. I'll buy a cool variant cover every once in a while just for the PC, not for investment purposes. But really, this Miles Gwen era has kind of been always my cutoff when it comes to buying / collecting books as investment pieces, stores of value, whatever you want to call it. But when you play in this end of the pool, the census counts are considerably higher. For those that don't know, that's basically pop count. Comic book people, they call it census. Card people, if you're watching this as a non-comic book guy or girl, they call it census instead of pop count. So if I say census, basically I'm talking about pop counts. These are some of the higher census count books out there. Now, what does this mean? It makes it a lot harder to shift prices up. It makes it a lot easier for the prices to fall out the bottom because you have so much inventory out there. It's very easy to find any one of these books. And most of these are all way down from the COVID highs to some degree or another, or announcement highs. The way if you're not normally a comic book person, typically the best time to sell is the first trailer or the first leak of something coming out. But generally speaking, right around that first announcement, first trailer, whatever it is, that's usually when it is peak prices for comics. Then they tend to level off after that, dip down a little bit, level off, and then they'll get a little juiced around the movie, but typically not back to announcement level heights. That is usually the best time. Worst time to buy, best time to sell. If everyone wants the thing that you are selling, that means you should probably be selling, not buying. That's generally a good way to look at it. So let's kick things off here with Ultimate Fallout 4. First appearance of Miles Morales. There are, just to put this out there, and I'm not going to go a deep dive into this. If you are chasing one or looking for one, do your homework. There are a lot of second print covers of this, and more concerning, reprints of this cover that look very similar to the original cover. So make sure you know what you are looking for, especially if you're buying raw, that you're not accidentally getting a reprint. There are a couple distinct things different. The second print, you can actually see his face. So on the front cover here, his face is revealed. That I actually have a second print in a CGC 9.8. Not the best for investment purposes, but I actually prefer that cover better. I think it's just a better looking cover because you can see his face. So let's go ahead and dive into this really quickly. Prices on Ultimate Fallout 4 sitting right at about 1,800 to 2K. Now, what we saw during peak market times, this got well up over $3,000, $3,300, $3,400, if not more in some cases. These snuck up all the way to, I think, close to the $4,000 range in some cases. It has obviously come way back. It is now sitting at just under $2,000. That you are looking at basically late 2020 prices. Here we are in February of 2021. That's when it kind of really started taking off. Remember, the comic book market moved a little bit slower than the sports card market did in regards to the hype and the bubble cycle. Most comics peaked in 2021, not 2020 like cards. So fired up there, and then you can see dipped way off over most of the back half of 2022. And then really since late 2022 has basically stayed flat. You can see the monthly average has basically been, here's October, 1,800. Here's December, 1,800. January, 1,800. February, 1,800. March, 1,750. What do we got for April? 1,800. And May, a little over 1,875. I'm sorry, that's June so far. So the price really hasn't moved up that much, and it does not appear, it looks like Spider-Verse coming out has maybe jumped it $200. This was regularly selling 1,800 to 1,900. It is starting to sneak into the 2,000s range. What it did add to it, and this is going to be the theme of the video, what the movie does, the announcement trailer, the initial hype, whatever the case might be, is what spikes it. Pulls back, levels out like we saw here. What the movie brings to it is liquidity. So many of these have sold in the last couple of days. If you just look at GPA, it has all the sales history. The beginning of May, you could see a couple sell each day. Here's 2 on the 1st, 2 on the 2nd, the 4th, the 7th, the 8th, couple on the 9th, couple on the 10th, 1 on the 11th, 2 on the 14th. So you can see a couple of these sell every single day, nothing crazy. Let's get to the end of the month when the movie comes out, and now you see the 30th, 3 sold. The 31st, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sold in one day. On the 1st, 3 sold, and then none have sold. We have this one on the 4th. It's been a little quiet over the weekend. But you could see from the 28th, basically, through the 4th, these things were flying out the door. Now, the prices didn't move that much. Basically, just people smacking bins instead of waiting out auctions. But it's still selling in that $1,800 to $2,000 range. If we pull up CGC Census, you can see almost 4,000 copies of this in a CGC 9.8 and 4,300 copies in a CGC 9.6. Now, this is a little tougher to grade because it was a polybagged book, so that adds a couple extra layers of complications to it in regards to getting it to grade out. That's why you see so many 9.6s in that grade. When we look at other more modern-ish books, you will notice that swings a little bit differently. And like I said, this book came out in 2011. The next one that we're going to talk about, and just to pull it up really quickly here to give you an idea, Edge of the Spider-Verse #2, this is the first appearance of Gwen, came out in 2014. Look at the difference here in 9.8s to 9.6s. Usually you don't see stuff like this, where there's one, hey, that's a ton of books. That's 8,000 copies between a 9.8 and a 9.6. But to see the 9.6s on an ultra modern outweigh the 9.8s almost never happens. And like I said, this is a good example. The Edge of Spider-Verse 2 First Gwen, you see just over 3,000 copies in a 9.8 and only 2,000 copies in a 9.6. Still quite pretty large census in the grand scheme of things. This is Edge of Spider-Verse #2. Same thing I will say here. If you are going to chase one of these, be aware what you are chasing. There are a bunch of different printings of this book: first print, second print, third print, fourth print, and I believe, I'm not even kidding, a fifth print, that all have basically the same color or cover with different colors on it. Instead of this light blue, it's a different color. There are tons of different variant covers of this book. There are modern reprints of this book. So if you're buying raw, make sure you know what you're doing. Even if you're buying CGC slab, always double check it on stuff like this because they have been known to make mistakes as well. Let's look at the pricing of this one. Very, very similar. Sitting at about $1,000. I do own one of these in a CGC 9.8. I bought mine back in early 2021 for right around $1,000. So I'm basically dead even on that book. And you can see a very similar story here. Late 2020 was going for about $900. Here you see the rise up. This is right about when I bought mine, right here in January. It's one of the first $1,000 books that I bought. Spikes all the way up to 1,800, dips back down again, heads back up towards the low 2000s rather. And then as 2022 goes on, almost the exact same pattern as Ultimate Fallout 4, slowly ticks down and now has kind of been leveling out since the beginning of 2023 at about that $1,000 price range. You could sometimes get copies in the 900s as we scroll through here. Going back to the beginning of the year, you see 1,100, 1,000. All right around that $1,000 mark is where this book tends to live. What you also see is a similar situation. Let's go to May and look at the sales again. We have some on the 11th, one on the 14th, the 16th, the 25th, the 28th, and now we're at that 28th point where the movie comes out, and now look how many have sold just over the last couple of days as opposed to the entire rest of the month of May. This one does not transact quite as often as Ultimate Fallout 4. There's a little bit less of them, and I actually think people are a little bit more firm on pricing on this one. You see less come to auction, so this is people just smacking bins. So like I said, it did dip down a little bit. You can occasionally snag a copy in the 9s. Now it's back over 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,100, 1060, 1080. I'm not sure what's up with this 652. I didn't look at this. Maybe it's an off-white to white or something like that, which would be weird in a modern. I don't know. But regardless, basically going for about $1,000 now. But very similar. Not much of a price spike, but instantly added liquidity to the book where it is much easier to sell. You could sell it way faster, way easier for a market priced book. You know, if you put this out at 1,000 on eBay, it might sit for a few days, a week, a month previous to this. If you put it up this weekend at 1,000, there's probably a decent chance you're at least going to get a bunch of offers on it, and maybe it even sells. So that's essentially what the movie is doing, is greasing the skids on this stuff to get it out the door. Next one, once again, Census on this one, 3,300, just over 3,300 in a 9.8. Next one we're going to look at, first appearance of 2099. I know this is a much ballyhooed debate, whether it is ASM 365 or Spider-Man 2099 #1. There was essentially a preview of Spider-Man 2099 #1 in 365. So this is, I believe, technically considered as true first appearance. I pulled both. So the comic book folks can relax. I'm showing both. If I was going to chase one, it would probably be this one. It is a little bit of a cool cover if you grew up in the 90s. It just is what it is. But 30th anniversary, Amazing Spider-Man, ASM 365. I'll go to the Census first here. 2,400 in a CGC 9.8, 2,600 in a CGC 9.6. More common to see something like this in a book from the early 90s. It is from the early 90s, so that means that there are a lot of them. This one typically goes for around $200, give or take. A little bit under that, a little bit over that, depending on the day of the week. You could see when the movie was announced that he was going to be one of the main players in it. This thing got a little nutty, all the way up to $500 for a hot minute. Very quickly came down and is basically almost leveled off. Not quite back to early 2020 prices. So this book went for $130 in late 2019. It currently sits at that 180 mark. So it's kind of almost back to 2019 prices. 2099, not exactly the most popular character in the world. He has a little cult following. I know my boy Kenny Fornos really likes him. But once again, same story here. You can see actually a decent amount of these sold in May, but it really picked up with the release of the movie. Here's just the 28th to June 3rd That is a pretty decent chunk of copies to be moving. Once again, all kind of in that same price point. This probably averages out to probably just under $200 or right around $200. A lot of 180s, 190s, 200s, 220s on that. So once again, similar story. The spike happened at the announcement. This is a better example of it because Gwen and Miles have had a lot of hype on them for a long time. But 2099 was a new addition to the Spider-Verse franchise. You could see that spike on the announcement and then the immediate pullback and leveling off. Now, this probably got to hit a little bit harder because of just the general comic book and collectibles market over the last year and a half. But this is exactly what I would expect to see. This is exactly what I was talking about towards the beginning of the video. Next up, Spider-Man 2099 #1, red foil cover, classic cover from that era. I was never big into the 2099 stuff. A lot of the major characters all got 2099 editions. I think Spider-Man is the only one that kind of hit. I will say, I have a new fondness for the character after seeing the movie. I just really like the way that they animated him and the way that his webbing worked and stuff like that. I just thought he was on screen, just looked cool, basically. In all honesty, is the easiest way to describe it. Oscar Isaac voiced him. Great job voicing him. Census on this one. Once again, we're talking about an early 90s book, so there are a lot of them. CGC 98, 3,200 copies. CGC 96, 1,700 copies. And 94 is 2,000 copies almost. And then, once again, pricing, kind of exactly what we talked about. Did the big peak up at or around the announcement of the video, and then immediately dropped back and it kind of flattened out. Now, this is still selling for quite a bit more than what it was going for in late 2019, unlike ASM 365. That one is still sitting at pretty decent level, or that one reset rather all the way back to late 2019 levels to 2020 levels, whereas 2099, a lot of years there, 2099 did not do that. It is holding a little bit better. Once again, this is a fun cover to have on display. I could see this one doing pretty well. This one, once again, I'm not going to get into the whole first appearance debate. They're both cool books. If you are a 2099 specifically fan, I think you probably want this one more because it displays cooler. Sometimes it kind of gets into the whole, use like the Gambit debate here. You know, is it X-Men Annual or is it 266? Technically, it's probably X-Men Annual, but everyone would rather own 266 because it's a cooler cover. Same with Hulk 180 and 181. So if you want to kind of fall into that, I get it. If I'm a fan of the character, this is the one that I want because it displays way better. The red foil cover is kind of cool. My guess here is that this stuff, specifically the 2099 stuff, will slowly tick down as we move further and further away from the movie, flatten out a little bit, and then we'll get a trailer for the next one, and then it'll get a little bit of a spike back up again, rinse and repeat this entire process all over again. Now, I didn't dig into the weeds here. I'm sure Swaggle or one of the other comic book content creators will get into the weeds on the 15,000 different cameos that were in this, and if any of the villains or any of the other stuff popped in prices. I just wanted to keep this one a little high level for my audience for the key factors in this or from this movie. And if you just walked out of Spider-Verse and you're looking to FOMO into something, these are some of the books that you might be looking for. My personal favorite, obviously I own one, and I'm a huge fan of hers, is The Edge of the Spider-Verse #2. Really, really like that one. And I have to imagine, once again, this is where a lot of the value stays stored up into these two books, The Ultimate Fallout 4 and The Edge of the Spider-Verse 2. It's just a matter of time before we get live action versions of those two characters. It'll probably be once Across the Spider-Verse finishes up, or the Spider-Verse finishes up, and maybe that movie even ends with something like with them crossing over into their real life versions. I don't know, but we are going to get live action versions of those two characters. They would be stupid not to. That being said, please don't stop making the animated stuff. Absolutely fantastic movie. If you saw it, let me know in the comments down below what you think about it. Try to stay spoiler free, or at least put like a spoiler warning and tick down a couple spaces on the old enter key, and then type your comment just to be respectful of the people that have not seen it yet. I'm fine to talk spoilers in the comments, but like I said, just tag it with a spoiler warning and maybe enter key down a couple times to hide it from people that are just casually scrolling, but great movie. Cannot recommend it enough. I would even go see it again in a second time, and I usually don't do that with movies in the theaters, at least not in a really long time. So that's all I got for you, boys and girls. We will catch you on the next one. Peace.